And I would think, you know what, here's this guy or girl, you know, and she has this wonderful sociological method, SPSS, XXX5B, whatever it is. And now I need like $500,000 and I will interview 2 million people and they will tell me something really important about human cloning. You can see that funders would really, really appreciate that because there's something that is meaty as opposed to saying, I'll think about it. I also wonder whether most of these shifts were actually researcher initiated in the sense of we looked at the world around us and thought, you know what, these are really important issues. Or whether we more or less like sex workers thought, well, there's the funding, you know, let's jump at the opportunity. I'm afraid to say that probably the latter might be true for very many of us. And in turns, I mean, what happened, right? We get the research funding, what do? Almost certainly we'll have PhD students that then for years will be working on those issues that other people are interested in, any funders or politicians, so on and so forth. So I find all of this really, really problematic. Partly then, of course, as a journal editor, we get the results of that. And our journals pretend that these things are important. This is sort of the cream of the academic research enterprise, while really it might be completely determined by somebody outside who paid somebody else to do particular things they're interested in, and we print them. This is when the circle closes. So there you come into publishing ethics issues. So now I realize I have very little time, so I just want to quickly talk about changes to bioethics publishing. Of course, everything has changed essentially once we went from print publishing to digital publishing. First of all, of course, it goes without saying, if you have open access, for us in the humanities, open access at the moment is not working. That's the baseline, because open access as a business model means you have to pay an advertising fee for somebody to upload your paper to a web server, and they charge you thousands. Versus at the moment for our subscription-based journals like bioethics, a library will be stripped naked in terms of fees, but somebody has to pay for that, right? Nothing is free of charge. The advantage of open access is, of course, that people in poorer countries will be able to read that contents. The truth is, this is also true for most subscription-based journals because there's all sorts of access schemes, so it's really not a big deal. These are not hindrances to access. I would love to talk more about impact factors and quality. I don't have time for this, so all I wanted to say is this. I think at this point in time, otherwise ask me about it. I think it is tragic for us in the humanities, but certainly for us in bioethics, that we allow ourselves to be hijacked by the impact factor. The impact factor has nothing to do with quality. It simply measures how often a particular paper is cited over a 2-year window period. And the reality is, if you write a particularly idiotic paper and you get it published somewhere, probably lots of people will cite it. Does it prove you anything about the quality of that manuscript? Of course it doesn't, right? Where this is dangerous is that these tools that were designed for medical schools are now holding hostage people across universities. In philosophy, for instance, in law, where public citation patterns are totally different to the biomedical sciences for which this was invented. So one of my pleas today to you, and I do this wherever I can, is to say, in bioethics, we should have a serious conversation about what we consider good quality. And I'm not certain that I have an answer to that, but it would be really worth thinking about it, and then go to our powers that control us and tell them what we think is good quality, and we want to be measured by that as opposed to by this impact factor. Okay, availability and rapid dissemination go together. Availability, the nice thing is that, you know what, I take my time, and then if nobody asks questions, that's just too bad. Is this an earthquake?
Just open the window to get some fresh air, sorry.
It's all right, no, don't worry, I was joking anyway. Availability, people, availability. In the old days, availability meant we had like what, maybe if we were lucky, we had 1,000 print copies, they were in the library, and nobody would really ever see those. You had no idea who would use it, right? And if the professor had it in their room, the students would never see it, so basically it was over. Today you go to, as you know, you do it online and everybody can see it. Here's what I find exciting about this, in addition to that this disseminates information much faster. What is exciting about this is that people in developing countries for the first time have access to that information, because it doesn't cost a publisher anything to say, you in Zimbabwe can read this free of charge, as they call it. All they do is like let them through, right? I think this is wonderful and exciting. The flip side of this stuff is that we are in a situation where now both us as editors, really, if you want it on a monthly basis, but also the publisher, we know exactly what sells. That is a serious threat to publishing integrity and publishing ethics. Because if we are driven by impact factors and article downloads as opposed to quality, we find ourselves in a situation that, in a way, I mean, when I look at the paper, I know already what the odds are that this thing is going to be cited, downloaded, and so on and so forth, as opposed to, is this paper inherently a good paper? I find this very problematic, I have to be honest. We, in our field, have a whole pile of specialized journals, and I'm really, really excited about them, genuinely, including those neuro and nanoethics journals that will go places, no doubt. But really, it is interesting to see how many of those journals will survive over time, because there's a lot of new journals that have come about from the American Bioethics to, oh God, I forgot now. We have about 30, 40 or 50, about between 40 and 50 in-print bioethics journals, and like an infinite number of online bioethics journals only. Internationalization is kind of exciting, and then it isn't, because partly because I do Developing World Bioethics, so suddenly I get from all these developing countries all the little bioethics journals in languages. I don't even know what these languages are. It's like really, really weird stuff to me. Including, I discovered that the Chinese produce, as you know, Ruth, you only joined the board of this thing. It's like a thick journal, which is probably 120 or 150 pages long. It comes like every 2 weeks or every 4 weeks. It's called the Chinese Journal of Medical Ethics, that I'm certain nobody reads in our parts of the world. So you talk about globalization, internationalization. It's not going to happen. Don't delude yourself unless you think English is the lingua franca of bioethics, which by a long stretch it is not, no matter what we think. And I've actually no answer to that. I find it deeply disappointing that the abstracts that I read in this Chinese journal, for instance, most of the time I find them unintelligible. And they might be completely unintelligible, but it might just be a bad translation. The rest I can't read. And the only thing that they ever quote is either Pogge or Beecham Childress. So they don't seem to know any other books in that part of the world either. English language books. There's plenty of Chinese texts, right, that we would have never heard of. So I wonder how you will sometime deal with that when you globalize things. Publishing ethics, as I said, the problem that I think journal editors face is that we publish things that we know have been written on order from somebody who funded it. The other problem is the threats to publishing integrity with regard to, now I'm lost my train of thought. Yeah, but really, because of the data that we have, we know what types of articles fly and will be considered successful by the publisher. That's very problematic, because that means commercial pressures will have an impact on what gets actually out into the world. I have no answers to that at the moment. In terms of plagiarism, which I find really exciting in this context, it's much easier today to catch plagiarized texts. And here in this thing that I mention in the article by Dan Brock and his colleague, Frank Miller, that article that was published in November last year has already since been plagiarized in Biomed Central Medical Ethics. It's no secret anymore because I had to withdraw it. You might want to read how the withdrawal notice looks like. It says voluntary retraction, unfortunate incident, blah, blah, blah. It was clear plagiarism, right? In a medical ethics journal. So that makes it very difficult, because I might find myself in a situation where I know I published plagiarized text, and somebody wants me to withdraw it. If I say we retract this because this was plagiarized, and I live in Britain, somebody will sue me, courtesy to the libel laws that you have in this country. Really serious issues that will affect journal editors. I also think, and this is the last point I want to make, I'm a Luddite as far as print copies are concerned, even though I accept that nobody realistically looks at them and sees them. And the reason for this is that I do not, for a moment, trust the integrity of electronic-only publishing. We have seen prestigious journals, such as the Journal of the American Medical Association, changing publishing histories, where they had the same URL of an online-only text with a DOI number, which is supposedly unique for a text, and they changed retrospectively the content of that file. to which already, to the original version, people had replied. Then JAMA changed it, and everybody who replied to it looks like a total moron now, because you can't find it anymore in the now supposedly published document. Now, if there's a print copy, trust me, the JAMA editors would have been totally unable to go through all those libraries, to rip out the page and put another page in. So I'm making a bit light of it, but really it is a serious issue. If you have something only digitally and you do not have it in print, I think there are serious problems to guarantee the integrity of the publication history. And this might all sound a bit arcane to some of you, but it's just so important. And publishers almost certainly will do away with this. It's just a matter of time that the print copies will be gone altogether, because it's just cheaper and faster and whatnot. And I'll leave it with that, because I have really run out of time now, 2 minutes. So thanks very much, yeah.
We do have some time left for questions. I see at least 3 on the first row. Oh, Ruth, for the first one.
Thanks, Udo. There's a number of questions I could ask, but I want to ask a question about genetics, because when you were doing your survey of topics, you didn't mention genetics, but one does say that, well, that's often cited as an example of the way in which the funding available has influenced a lot of people to go into research in the field, and yet it didn't figure prominently on your survey of topics that came up.
You're absolutely right. Remember that I talked about weaknesses of categorization? I would never publish this. This student has decided that all the genetic testing stuff and access, right to know and not to know, clinical ethics, she was done with that. And by the time she was done with that, it was too late for me to kill her. And so I will not mention her name accordingly, and that was my responsibility. So this is just an oversight, nothing else. This has to be looked at again.
But I think also it is the case that a lot of stuff on genetics goes into other journals like Nature Reviews Genetics, Journal of Genetic Counselling, so not necessarily bioethics.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
I just wanted to speak in defence of electronic journals.
You're biased.
Because I edit one. But also in defence of quality, because I quite like to be able to see which articles are published and which have been most read, because I'm interested in seeing what topics are interesting. And in a way, it allows me to do automatically this kind of analysis of themes and things on behalf of the journal that I'm editing. But it also allows the people publishing in my journal and other electronic journals to make a similar choice about where they want to publish, almost in reaction or against the idea of publishing in a journal because it has a high impact factor. Because you might publish in the online journal because you know that the last 2 articles on nanotechnology were downloaded 100 times in the first week since they were published, for example. So I think there is a strength in there that might be a weakness. I also think it's very, very important that we trust editors to be able to make the quality judgments, because, for example, although I don't have a paper version of my journal, I would never allow somebody to retrospectively change the content of the journal. Equally, I wouldn't be pressured to publish something because it was on a certain theme if it was crap, because otherwise what's the point of the peer review? And I think maybe we need to shift our quality mechanism away from these listings and I've forgotten the name of the index.
ISI.
The ISI index, sorry. And back towards the idea that we as editors, we as peer reviewers and editorial members, we're responsible for academic quality, not a scientific organisation that makes a ranking of our journal as 1, 2, 3 or 4.
Well, with regard to the first part, of course, I mean, the print journals today have the same statistical information that you have. There's no difference. Where I think you have a very strong point is that your journals, the open access online only journals, are kind of nicer because you made your money prior to the downloads. We need to prove to libraries that people read our things or that they are being cited, those quality standards. While for you, basically, you know, somebody paid you already by the time you upload it to the server. I don't know whether it applies to your journal, but that's the open access journals work, right? So in a way, you made your money prior to that. So these pressures may well not apply to you in the same way, and I think it's desirable. Do not get me wrong. I think it's a very good point that you're making there.